He had to push and hold that button. So, right. Mark's called me a couple times. Today was one of those times, and the tent meeting's going well in the sense of there's been no baptisms yet, but there's been somewhere near 10 denominational people there each night. And so they're learning. There's a lot of Baptists in that area, and so if he does like he did down at Hillsboro and has question and answer, he'll probably do a lot of good down there. Don't know how far from Winston-Salem he is, but I was a little concerned about his not having cell service at the hotel. And, so he said you do have a good breakfast there. So he's planning on starting back after the service Friday evening. I think he said the last time he made it back to Chillicothe and just couldn't stay awake any longer. It's about a 7-hour drive, but starting that late, it's wee hours in the morning. So anyway, he feels good about the meeting. He sent me a picture of the tent. It's a little bigger and fancier than the one we had down in Hillsboro. And he's doing all the preaching this time, not sharing it with someone else. I liked what Brian had to say. He's a very good speaker. And he probably just wrote that out. He has such a good mind that he probably just wrote that out without it looking anything up. That's the way he is. And he's a good speaker, and we certainly do appreciate him when he fills in. And he had a lot of good things to say. And it makes us wonder at all ages, probably the extremes, the older people and the younger people, if they really take the advice that he gave. We older people are trying to, and my wife tells me, you give too much advice. She tells me, I'm always telling my children something, that I think they need to do that's for their benefit. She tells me I'm too nosy. And then, I don't know, maybe the children don't appreciate it, but they don't reprimand me, so I guess they do respect me. But in the lessons that we're studying here, he mentioned pride a lot. We studied about that first, a proud look, a lying tongue, and we're going to finish up lying tongue tonight and then go to hands that shed innocent blood. These fit so well into the society in which we live. Human beings from the time of, Cain and Abel have always been into these areas that we're talking about. When God went to Cain and tried to get him to settle down and accept the fact that he was the older brother, if he would get himself under control, he would rule over Abel, everything would be fine. But his hatred had gotten to such a point that there was no turning back for him. So he just let it go so long that even God himself couldn't talk him out of it. So this, to me, tells us about the severity of the things we're talking about. Tonight we're going to talk about hands that shed innocent blood, and that topic is about murder, and we're going to talk about some of those things. Human beings' emotions get people killed. Heard on the news this week where this lady pulled up behind this guy. I don't know if he was on his cell phone, but I guess he didn't leave the intersection when he should have. She blew the horn. He got behind her, chased her, took a gun out, and was shooting into her car just for that. He didn't like to have somebody to reprimand him in the sense that, hey, she blew the horn, I will show her, I'll just kill her or whoever's in that car. But this is the kind of people that we have out there in society. We used to look at foreign countries as being uncivilized, but in our day and time, human beings a lot of times don't care much about one another. And certainly last week we were talking about lying, and we said lies are done for many reasons. Most of them are self-serving, to gain favor from others or to boast or to protect ourselves. And we said that they can become a habit and they can become a part of your life. And we said that was directly related to trust. One of the things we mentioned was how young people who are dating oftentimes aren't truthful with each other. And all of a sudden they get married and they don't even know who they got married to because they turned into somebody different. After they get married, they're not the person they thought they were. And so, the marital relationship, trust is a big word. So you should always, tell your significant other and then perhaps your spouse the truth. But we stopped in talking about the examples of lies that people tell just, to be kind to someone. We said last week in ending that, like, you tell somebody you look so good you haven't changed in 20 years, which is possible but not likely. Or you make excuses and say, I can't do that today, I'm too busy or I'm sick. Tell people they want something and you say, I lost it, when you just, don't want to mess with it. One of the good things we have today is caller ID. Because now you don't have to answer the phone and talk to that person if you don't want to, because sometimes you'll lie to them to get them off the line. Or, sometimes you'll tell, your spouse will say, so-and-so's calling, you'll say, don't answer that. Or tell them I'm not at home if he or she wants to answer it. Things like the checks in the mail. We've heard those things for years and years. But according to Hebrews 3 and 8 through 15, lies are the result of a seared conscience or a hard heart. Let's look at Hebrews 3 and 8 through 15 real quick. Hebrews 3. And these things we do, we talked about little white lies last week, and, we don't think that they really matter. It depends on the degree of the lie or the whether you consider it to be serious or not serious, but we need to watch, so we always try to tell the truth at all times. But Hebrews 3, verses 8 to 15 says, harden not your hearts as in the provocation in the day of temptation in the wilderness, when your fathers tempted me, proved me, and saw my works 40 years. Those people had to wander around 40 years because of what? They didn't believe that, God would do what he said he would do. He said, this is yours. You've got to go in and take it. And their hearts melted and they were afraid, and, except for two of the spies that were sent out. But anyway, it talks about the day of provocation. This provoked the Lord. There wasn't really any lie involved, but their hearts were just not receptive to what he was saying. And it says here, wherefore I was grieved with that generation and said, they do always err in their heart, and they have not known my ways. So I swear my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest. And so these are the type of things that happen to us. It says, take heed, brethren, lest there be in any of you an evil heart, and that's the ticket, an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily while it's called today, lest any of you be hardened through the deceitfulness of sins. And so, our hearts can become hard to the place where, and really it's talking about our brain or our conscience. Your conscience can become seared or get to the place where some things you do just don't bother you. You're not convicted by your conscience. But, lies that sometimes we consider to be courteous or little white lies. We said last week in ending up, you hear that commercial on television that says, no, that dress doesn't make you look fat. And I ended with an example there. Or you might tell the preacher, that was a good sermon. If it's not, I don't tell him it is. I just shake his hand and go on out. Because I won't tell him that I thought it was good if it wasn't. It might make him feel better and encourage him and all those type of things, but I guess maybe I'm hard-hearted. But I've heard people say, I'll be there for Sunday services or Sunday evening services. And the worst thing you can do, I think, as far as telling a lie is concerned, is to tell somebody, I'm going to pray for you. Now, you know what? If you don't do that, that's really bad. You want them to think you're a spiritual person and that you're not going to forget them, when in fact you have no intentions of praying for them. But these type lies can get to be really bad. We see a lot of things on television that we know aren't true, different ads. You can't have a party and have a good time without alcoholic beverages. We know that that's not true. We see all kind of things about diet plans and all these things that may or may not work. When it comes to watching commercials, there was a lady in Gallipolis that she always watched the Home Shopping Network and bought a lot of stuff. I'm not saying that, hey, it's her money. She can do that. But I think she bought a lot of things that after she bought it, she didn't really get what she thought she was getting. I always think of P.T. Barnum when I think of that, the circus guy that said, a fool and his money are soon parted. Some people, it's like gambling and things like that people get addicted to. And of course, in the scriptures, we always think about Ananias and Sapphira. In the early church, people were selling things they had and, giving money to the people who needed it, so that the church, in its early stages there were a lot of things that in order for people to survive, they had to have help. We don't do that much today. We have benevolence to help people when they need it, but that was a special case. But like he told them, look, this was yours, you sold it, and you know what you got for it, and you can give whatever portion that you want. But you lied, to God and told that you actually gave it. So that cost these people their life. We're all familiar with that story in Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 8. But a lot of people are hypocrites. Hypocrite by definition is somebody who pretends to be something that they're not. Back in the old days of the Greek plays and actors, the hypocrite was actually an important part. They were very popular there in those particular days. There was a little boy in Bible class, and the teacher said, "What is a lie?" They asked this little boy, "What is a lie?" Well, when you ask a child, you're probably going to get an honest answer. Their children will lie to you, but normally they're pretty good with one another and also to adults. And he said it's an abomination in the sight of God and a very present help in time of trouble. If he needed to do that to keep out of trouble, he would do it. Or the example of a preacher and that wouldn't happen here because I know the congregation better than this. The preacher announced that on Sunday that he was going to preach on lying. And he told the people to go home and read the 17th chapter of Mark. And so when they came in, he asked for a show of hands. How many read it? Hands went up all over the congregation. And that was a good segue, into that particular sermon that he had. But a lot of people lie to get out of hot water. But when you're caught in a lie, that's not good. Nobody wants to be caught there. Lies don't solve problems; they many times will compound it. And it's like when I think about compounding a lie, I think about Abraham and Sarah in Genesis 12 and Genesis 20, where he said, "Say that you're my sister." That caused the people in that country a lot of problems. It caused them to get in trouble with God. They were really innocent because they were lied to. And he did that to save his own skin, as we would say, or, to save his life. But, she could have lost her purity, and then all those things that happened to Pharaoh and Abimelech. I like this. Sometimes you have to lie maybe to save your life. There was a fellow traveling along in a horse and a buggy, had his dog with him, and a car came along and hit him, wrecked the buggy, knocked it over the hill. So this fellow in the car that hit him got out with a .38 pistol. And he came up, this was a horse-drawn vehicle. He came up and looked at the horse, it was injured, and he shot it and killed it. And then the dog was lying over there whimpering, and he went over and shot the dog and killed it. So this fella went to court to get back some of the things that he'd lost. And so the defendant's lawyer said, when you were asked, if you were hurt, didn't you say that you weren't? So we can understand that. So I thought that was funny. Maybe you didn't. But, it's funny, and a lot of times we do those things, but we need to always, tell the truth. He thought he wouldn't be alive if he had it. How many people, if a state patrol pulls you over for speeding, how many people would say, you're right, I was doing this many miles an hour, I deserve the ticket? We had, down in Lancaster, Ohio, when we had our offices down there for the Fuel Supply Division of American Electric Power, we had a state patrolman came in, and one of the things they asked him was, what kind of lies do people tell you? When you pull them over, they're going to give a ticket. He said, with women, the biggest thing that I get is they were rushing to get to the bathroom. But he said he had one fella that he was following. He had the lights and the siren and everything going, and this guy went into his neighborhood, pulled in his driveway, pulled in the garage, and got out and turned around and said, I didn't know you were behind me. Said he had another guy he was following that was fleeing. He went up this alley and stopped all of a sudden, jumped out, went around and opened the back door of the car and reached in the car, and the officer got out to see what he was doing. And he said, I had to change the baby's diaper. He said the surest way to get a ticket is to lie to me. I mean, they know they've heard them all, but a lot of people will do things, in order to avoid that. That's just a little thing that people don't think too much about. Of course, in the Bible, in Genesis 39, Potiphar's wife, she was a scorned woman when she couldn't get Joseph to lie with her, and so she lied to get even with him, and he was put in prison, which certainly worked well for God's people. Some lie to get money. There was a guy down in Gallipolis that was a car dealer. He was a car salesman, and the joke he always used to tell was, he went to the cemetery, and on the tombstone, he said there were two people buried there. He said a car dealer and an honest man. So, I guess they have a reputation. Not that he was that way. But how many times you ever gone to the theater and, at a certain age, the ticket price increases. And people they'll say, okay, what do we got here? Is he 10 yet? Not quite. So you get a cheaper ticket. And the kids know that, and they see that. But people will do little things like that. Sometimes you'll go and people will not charge you for something at a store. They'll forget it. And so, people say, guess I got that one free, But many times we don't think about things like that. But again, children are watching. And so we need to think about that. Now, if you're a senior, you need to ask for a senior discount. Got to throw that in. Consequences of lying are many and varied. But the biggest thing about lying is, if you're a Christian, it gives the church a bad name. If you have that reputation, you're giving the church a bad name. One of the things that's often said when people are invited to come to the worship service with us, they'll say, does so-and-so go there? Yeah. Well, I don't want to go where he goes because he's not an honest man, or because the way he conducts himself is not what a Christian should do. But being honest makes us look like Christians. You got to think about your example everywhere you go. I mean, it's almost like when we teach little kids, we teach about God being omniscient and omnipresent, that he's everywhere, sees everything and all this. But as adults, we don't seem to remember that many times. We think we can do something and get by with it. Nope. Same thing as talking about the kids. Proverbs 12 and 19 says, the lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. See, it just serves a purpose, and that's just about it. I saw one time a person was walking along, and they found a wad of money. Picked up, put it in their pocket, and went on. They'll say, well, I don't know whose it was, make all kind of excuses. But there should be someone, a law enforcement officer, whatever, could turn it in. Maybe that's all the money they had. Maybe they pulled their hand out of their pocket and that money dropped there. But, I'm not saying you find a penny and you try to find out who it belongs to, but that was a significant amount of money. The innocent people suffer many times, and that's for sure. We read Isaiah 59 many times. But look at Isaiah 59, beginning with verse 2. Talks about life. Jesus from you that he will not hear. For your hands are defiled with blood, your fingers with iniquity, your lips have spoken lies. That's one of the accusations. Your tongue hath uttered perversion. Verse 4. None calleth for justice, nor any pleading for truth. They trust in vanity and speak lies. They conceive mischief and bring forth iniquity. So that's one of the reasons we talk about it, is because this is an abomination to God. This is one of these 7 things that God hates. So what's going to happen to liars? Well, Proverbs 19:5 says, a false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaks lies shall not escape. Psalm 101 says God will not fellowship a liar. And Revelation 21:8, we're all familiar with that, about the lake of fire. This is one of the people named that's going to spend eternity in that lake of fire. And then we always want to remember Galatians 6:7, not deceived, God is for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. There's a payday coming. You may get by with it now and think nobody knows it, but certainly God knows it. And when we think about lying, we have to think about the tongue. Let's look at James 3 for just a moment. James 3. One of my favorite chapters, really. James chapter 3, verse 1. My brethren, be not masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. For in many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, talk about the tongue, the same is a perfect man and able to bridle the whole body. Think about that. If you can control the tongue, you're pretty special. Behold, we put bits in horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about their whole body. Behold also the ships, which, though they be so great, are driven of fierce winds, yet are they turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Though the tongue is a little member, and boasts great things, behold how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and is set on fire of hell. For every kind of beasts, and of birds, and serpents, and of things of the sea is tamed, and hath been tamed of mankind. Here's verse 8 is it. But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therewith we bless God, even the Father. Therewith we curse men, which are made after the similitude of God. So we need to have when it comes to the tongue. When I taught school, the 9th grade teacher taught physical science. And he had a degree in herpetology. And he liked snakes a lot. And he had this great big case, this frame and fiberglass case he kept in his basement, full of rattlesnakes and copperheads. He kept that in his basement. And I said, don't you ever worry about those things getting loose? And he said, I'll tell you what, I never go there without turning on the light and counting to make sure they're still in there. And that's the way the tongue is. We can control it. We probably could never completely tame it, as the Bible says, but we can work on controlling it. Sometimes that's hard to do. We use an expression of keep quiet, keep your mouth shut, all those type of things. But we have a tendency to want to tell others or get involved in conversations or do little white lies or make ourselves look better or whatever. The tongue is a huge enemy. And I think as long as we respect that, we will understand how vital it is to work on that. And you take back what you said. You can apologize for it, but it will give you a reputation if you're not careful. So we need to always think about what do we say as far as the tongue's concerned. Any questions before we go to the next subject? That finishes up last week about the tongue. Okay, let's look at hands that shed innocent blood. Now, what we're talking about here, we're talking about murder. We talk about innocent blood, we're talking about murder. You know, God has a lot to say in the Old Testament and some in the New Testament about capital punishment and about what should happen to murderers. And they, in the Old Testament, it divides the murderers up to into four different groups. And so we need to never have the opinion that capital punishment is wrong. You know, many people in the church aren't convinced of that. You know, the opposite is happening now that happened then. Now we take the murderer and consider his life to be precious and try to do something. Now, we talked last week about, you know, the giving a death sentence takes maybe 20 years or so of appeals, and so it costs a lot of money. So people plead down to a lesser charge, and so they go life in prison and things like that, maybe without parole, I don't know. But murder is something that is a result of malice, spite, envy, greed. Look at Cain and Abel. You know, when we talk about killing something, you know, we can talk about plants and animals or human beings. In this case, we're talking about human beings. In Exodus 20 and 13, in the Ten Commandments, number 6 says, "Thou shalt not kill." Now, we know that when Noah came off the ark, that was, he got permission to kill animals and eat animals for food. But that's not the kind of killing it talks about. You know, "Thou shalt not kill" is talking about murder. And that was a problem. It's always been a problem since man's been on the earth. We don't think much about that, but look at the road rage we just talked about a few minutes ago. People get killed because of road rage. That's anger. Or, you know, trying to get back at somebody or whatever. In Matthew 19:18, the new law says, "Thou shalt do no murder." So the old law says, "Thou shalt not kill." The new law says, "Thou shalt do no murder." It's the word phonos, P-H-O-N-O-S, is what they're talking about. This word means to slaughter, slay, murder. When it talks about Barabbas in Mark 15 and 7, he was called a murderer. And that's what he was. He was somebody that shed innocent blood. You know, he took life improperly. Matthew 15 and 19, "For out of the heart proceeds evil thoughts and murders." Again, this all starts, as we talked a while ago, about in our minds. And like we said about Cain, it got out of control to where even God couldn't talk him out of it, so he followed through with it. But in Genesis 9 and verse 6, it says, talking about when Noah got off the ark, "Whosoever sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man." We talked last week, we'll not read it this time, about in Romans 13, verses 1 through 7, about capital punishment, about the authority that's given to the government and to, you know, people that are in power. You know, when Jesus was having his conversation before his execution, you know, Pilate said, "Don't you understand that I have the power to crucify you or to release you?" And what did Jesus tell him? You wouldn't have any power if God hadn't given it to you. So God, you know, delegated that. That makes a big difference. But there's a big difference between murder and killing. Yes. Right.
You know, they knew the penalty was death for what they had done.
That's exactly right.
Has done nothing that's worthy of it. So
Right.
they knew that, that was part of the law, and they knew it, and they were.
Yeah, and it's always been in place, and people now just don't look at things the way that, the Old Testament was our schoolmaster. And, we're not talking an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth here, but we're talking about a law designed to protect people. They had the cities of refuge where if you accidentally killed somebody, you could flee to there, stay there until, the chief priest died and you were all right. But even that, if people went there and was found out, if witnesses came and said it wasn't an accident, they go get him and kill him. But you've got to look at things in the way that they are. 1 John 3:15, as we said before, whosoever hateth his brother is a murderer. So that's where it all starts out. In Acts 7 and 58-60, Saul consented to the murder of Stephen, and it was murder is what it was. The Jews murdered Jesus. They killed him, we say, but they actually murdered him. It was innocent blood. He was a man that they had to go look for false witnesses to even get him turned over to the officials that had the power to execute him. And so that's a very important point. But hate fueled by anger is normally the source of murder. And of course, some people just don't have a conscience, but sometimes grudges are settled that way. I like what James said in James 1:19, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. And if you stop and think about that last statement, slow to wrath, can go a long way toward, keeping you out of jail or keeping you from murdering somebody. Ephesians 4:6, be angry and sin not. And sin not, let not the sun go down on your wrath. Of course, we use expressions like if looks could kill. Somebody's mad at you and they give you the evil eye, say, oh, if looks could kill, I'd be dead. There's a lot to that. Because people sometimes can't let that go. Not everybody is alike. And so unresolved anger gives Satan an opportunity in our lives to plant the seeds of murder. So you don't want to let that sun go down on your wrath. Words hurt and words can kill. Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. We talked about that in James. But words can devastate a person's life. Did you ever talk to somebody and all of a sudden you wiped a smile off their face by what you said? By human interactions, that what you said didn't go over very well, as we would say. And a lot of times you might steal hope. There was a girl on the TV, I don't remember the states when these things happened. She talked this young man into taking his own life, into committing suicide. That's what those words did. She was an accessory, to murder. Proverbs 22 and 24 says, make no fellowship with an angry man. Some people just carry a chip on their shoulder. Leviticus 24 and 21, he that killeth a man shall be put to death. Also, it says the same thing in Numbers 35 and 31. You have to have a deterrent there for crime. Like I said, the idea today, God said to murderers to be put to death, but today people think you should do everything to... The thing that aggravates me, and maybe it doesn't aggravate you, is when they talk about, okay, they're putting the death penalty on hold in Ohio because the guy who got put to death suffered. He choked and whatever for 30 minutes. So what? We've got to get to the point where we realize that, this man's going to die. It may take him 30 minutes. He may suffer or he may not. But the law of Moses, we'll talk about this just for a minute, about out of time. The law of Moses had 4 types of homicide, which means killing human beings. You have justifiable, which is self-defense. There's for people who have a permit to carry, you have a rule that says, it's a castle rule, that says if somebody breaks in your house, you can kill them. That's self-defense. You have to prove self-defense. Sometimes that's not easy to do. A thief killed in the act of stealing. If he gets killed, that's not really considered what we talk about murder. We talk about accidental, the city's a refuge. We understand how that works. I like this one, judicial homicide. In other words, a crime's been committed, it's worthy of death, and the punishment, of course, will be a deterrent. But, policemen that shoot a criminal, that's not murder, that's justice. There's a difference there. Now there's a lot of things that have happened here in recent times about where police brutality and police actually do murder somebody. We're not saying that doesn't happen, but normally soldiers, if they're defending and protecting their country, that's not murder if they kill somebody. So that's killing somebody, but it's not murder. But deliberate homicide is a death sentence. Even Paul before Festus in Acts 25 and 11, he saw death penalty, and he knew that could happen to him. Just like, Jesus did. In other words, it was in place then, and it should be in place now. I thought it was interesting to look at we'll end here, at the Jewish law and the crimes that were capital crimes. And if some of these were that way today, we'd have less crime, perhaps. Of course, if a guy's convicted of murder, bearing false witness on a capital offense, that's capital offense. Kidnapping, insult or injury to parents. God did a lot to protect the parents. At one time, if a child was out of control, he could be stoned to death. But that's a capital crime. Insult or injury to parents. Incest. Premarital sex. We have a lot of that goes on today. People have sex before they're married. You could have been, killed for that back in those days. Adultery, homosexuality, witchcraft, idolatry, blasphemy, and violation of the Sabbath. There were several rules that they had that were tough. Today, and of course one of the things we always think about, I haven't mentioned it yet, is abortion. That's legalized murder. You take the life of that child, you're a murderer. In the Roe versus Wade thing, that lady who was involved in that is now says she's sorry that ever happened, and she's trying to do her best for the rest of her life to correct anything she can regarding that particular case of Roe versus Wade. But you can read instances of these abortion clinics, and they've interviewed people who work there. They do everything they can to get these girls to go ahead and have the abortion. They said they won't show them a sonogram because if they see that, they probably won't want to kill it. They don't let them listen to the baby's heart because if that happens, they may go soft and don't want to kill it. They do everything they can to make sure. They tell them it'll all be over with, and you won't have to worry where your child is, if it's, adopted and all these type things. Everything they can do to promote abortion is being done. Now, guess why abortion is on the decline in this country? Because of the day after pill. People now have a pill that you can take that will abort that. Of course, it's in the really, really early stages of development. But you're not going to be pregnant because it causes that child to be aborted at a very, very early stage. So actually the abortion rate has gone down because of the day after pill. So thanks, appreciate it.